All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. So let's do this thing. Let's talk about Jorge Masvidal, who's about to fight Nate Diaz. What? Big story. That actually is a big story. And I mean, anytime that you get two of the top 5 biggest stars in the UFC who are going to face each other, big story. Big story. That's exactly what that is. Both of those guys are huge needle pushers now, right? Nate Diaz fights anyone. He's going to sell over 1 million pay-per-views, certainly right now. And Masvidal just showed that he can push the needle for an extra what? What do you guys think that pay-per-view against Kamaru Usman, where he fought Kamaru Usman, would have done absent Masvidal? Okay, it did 1.3 million buys. What do you think it does without Masvidal on it? What do you think? Right? 600, 700, best case scenario, right? So, or let's even give him credit and say it was 800,000. Best case, which is the same number that John Jones and Daniel Cormier sold for their first fight. Okay, so 800,000 is a huge win. Okay, so let's say it would have done 800, which it wouldn't have. You still got 500,000 buys, $30 million that Jorge Masvidal drove by himself by being on the card. So, I mean, it's going to be a big event, and it says a lot about what Jorge is trying to accomplish with his career right now, right? Because, listen, like, there are certain guys, very few, Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal happen to be 2 of the very few of these guys, where they can be on their own journey, right? They're big enough stars that you can they can pick and choose their opponents, make a fortune, because they have permanent back-end pay-per-view deals with the UFC. Now, Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal, there's no possible position that the UFC can take where those guys do not deserve back-end points on the pay-per-view, whether they have the belt or not. There's no reasonable position for them to take. Everyone knows that they are by themselves responsible for a tremendous amount of the buys. And they're responsible for those things, not necessarily only because of things the UFC have done. Like, Jorge Masvidal is constantly creating content, and, you know, creating buzz. Nate Diaz is Nate Diaz, man. Like, it is what it is, man. So that particular event is going to generate the most amount of money for Masvidal of any of his options, for sure. And also, it's the lowest amount of risk that he loses. I mean, what's going to be different in this fight versus last fight? Nate Diaz is a lot of things. A guy who can make, you know, radical adjustments to his fight game is not one of those things, right? I mean, Nate Diaz is what he is. He is an exceptional fighter, but he's got a very funky style that is not very malleable, right? Like, it's a style that's real hard to beat, but it's not like, I mean, it's not like all of a sudden he's going to start snapping high kicks or become an exceptional wrestler. You know, all of a sudden he's going to take top position and start raining down elbows. Like, I mean, it's just, he is what he is. So that makes it hard when he's fought a guy who clearly had his number to pick Nate Diaz in a victory, because Nate Diaz is not a guy who knocks people out with one shot, right? So even he can catch him theory is highly unlikely. So very low risk, very high pay, no brainer. Okay. The only other fight that's out there for Masvidal is Leon Edwards. And if you want to fight for the title and you're weighing your options and you're like, all right, so I could fight Leon Edwards or I could fight Nate Diaz. Okay. So obviously Nate Diaz, I'm going to make more money. I would say the probability of me losing that fight is extremely low. Leon Edwards is a much bigger challenge. And if I beat Nate Diaz, can I still end up with a title shot? Yes, under certain circumstances. If I fight Leon Edwards and win, can I end up with a title shot? Certainly. Okay, so it's a matter of how much bigger are the chances that I end up with an immediate title shot if I beat Leon Edwards versus the extra amount of money and the additional risk that I have to take fighting him versus over here. So if you think about this, it's like, all right, so play out every single scenario. Right? Play out every scenario that exists at the top of 170 right now. So Kamaru Usman fights Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman wins, right? So if Kamaru Usman is still the champion and Masvidal beats Leon Edwards, he might get an immediate title shot. But if he beats Nate Diaz, he won't. You know, that's not going to drive him into the next title shot unless Tyron Woodley beats Colby. If Tyron Woodley beats Colby, then basically Masvidal can win any fight and then he'll get the next shot, right? If Tyron Woodley beats Colby, then Masvidal is going to be next in line with any victory almost for sure. So, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer right there, right? So if you can already think of a scenario where he gets an immediate rematch with Kamaru Usman, regardless of the fact that he only beat Nate Diaz, and I don't mean only, but like in terms of the rankings, then certainly you take the lower risk fight. Okay. Now, if Gilbert Burns wins, then for sure, if he wins, he's in line. As a matter of fact, I don't even think the landscape changes much. I think it's as simple as this. I think if Tyron Woodley beats Colby, then Masvidal, whoever he beats, gets the next shot. You know, I mean, this is still a business, and Leon Edwards is like the girl out in the cold that no one will fight because right now he's not big enough. He's too high risk for the lack of following that he has. That's his challenge. He's a really risky fight, and you're not going to sell a bunch of pay-per-views for fighting him. So, you know, ultimately, they're going to need to get Leon Edwards with either Colby or Tyron Woodley. I would imagine the loser of that fight, which is much more convenient if it's Colby, because if Tyron Woodley's coming off 3 straight losses, how exciting is anybody that he's going to fight? Probably not very much. And it puts him in that place where you know exactly where he's at, which is aging fighter who will beat anyone that's that's 7, 8, 9, and will lose to anyone who's 4, 5, you know, or 4, 3, 2, right? So it's just that part of the career where, you know, you were at the top, now you're sliding down, and you're right here, right? You're going to lose to all these guys, but you'll beat all these guys. How do you create an exciting fight? How do you create an exciting career around that? It just is what it is. So, I mean, Tyron really needs this win. He really needs this win, obviously, right? He's already lost to 2 of the top 4 guys in the division, but so he's still kind of right there. I used to think Woodley was going to run through Colby, and now I'm not so sure. I'm just not so sure. I mean, the thing is Colby is going to fight him just like Gilbert Burns did, and just like Kamaru Usman did. But I think Kamaru Usman actually has better wrestling, a little bit more, probably a little bit stronger. Like he's like a little bit stronger than Colby, and I think Gilbert Burns has better striking. And if Colby goes in there and does the thing that he did with Robbie Lawler, honestly, it could look exactly like the Robbie Lawler fight, where because all I'm thinking in my head is like, when is Tyron going to unleash an overhand that's going to land? And when I really think about that, I'm like, man, if that's all he's got, he's not going to win. You know, you always think that like, well, when's he going to unleash that big bomb? And because Colby's just throwing these little pitter patters. You know, he's just constant action. Like eventually, Tyron's going to throw a bomb through there, right? And you just like kind of are dismissive of something that you can't make it not hurt, right? Like, so yeah, he's not going to knock you out with that, but like, if I hit you like this in the face, do you think that's going to hurt? Like, it's going to hurt, right? You're not going to go to sleep, but your brain can't get out of its own way and go, okay, yeah, I'm going to just forget that I'm going to get hit that hard, and then so I can throw this overhand bomb. It's like if you are just overwhelmed with having to dodge, slip, whatever, it really is hard to find the opening where you can land that big shot, because Colby's going to be boom, boom, boom. Then as soon as you're like, oh, I think I have my spot, boom, he's on you, and you're up against the cage. It's got to be really frustrating to fight against. But yeah, I think Colby's going to win. I do. But so let's say Colby wins and Masvidal beats Nate Diaz, then Colby probably gets the next shot regardless, right? But that's the best case scenario for these two guys anyway, right? It doesn't, like, for Masvidal and Colby, they've been working this thing for years, right? Whether it's, like what I'm saying is real or not real, irrelevant as it relates to the fight game. They've been working this, I'm going to publicly talk about my beef with this guy for years. So like, as it relates to the fight game, it just doesn't even matter if it's real. It just doesn't matter. Like the groundwork is laid for a gigantic pay-per-view, which is what it's all about, okay? Whether they hate each other in real life or they don't hate each other in real life, does not matter. It just doesn't matter. It's all about dollars. It's business, fight game. So if he really hates him and they made the decision through their, gritted hatred of each other to both publicly talk about their beef, then that's good fight game. And if they were sitting in a room one day and said, hey, listen, when we do these interviews, what's going to make us more money? Us being best friends or us hating each other, right? Why don't we just like hate each other? We're in the same weight class. Like we may as well, like if we're going to end up having to fight at some point, we may as well make it worth our money. So when we talk on camera, why don't we just say that we don't like each other? You know, well, everybody knows we're best friends. What's the genesis going to be? Well, we could say blah, 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 blah. I mean, either way, they earned it. They earned the pay-per-view dollars. So if Masvidal wins and then he gets the title and then they fight Colby, they're going to get paid, son. They're going to get paid. And if Colby wins the title, if Colby wins the title and then they do this pay-per-view where Colby's getting back end and Masvidal's always getting back end, those two guys are going to get paid, son. They're going to get paid. And they're going to have, I mean, they will have earned it. I mean, like, absolutely. There's nothing that I hope for more than that scenario. And I don't mean to like backdoor Masvidal on, you know, getting a title shot or whatever, but I just would love to see this whole thing come to fruition, right? Because think about this, like, let's say it's completely real, right? And their beef really started over like $10,000 that Colby supposedly was supposed to pay Masvidal's trainer, right? Like he reneged on owing him $10,000, some baby money, right? Then and their beef for over that amount of money led to each of them making an additional, call it like $6 million over what they would have made had they not been beefing. There's some poetry in that, I think, right? But going back to the original topic, what this says about Masvidal's goals are that he is smart in the fight game and he's prioritizing money. And you know, I'm going to be honest with you, when I started this video, I actually was going to say that it said that he's prioritizing money fights over the titles. And I actually, as I talk this thing through, as I've told you guys a million times, I do my best thinking when I'm actually on camera and I'm talking this thing through. I take it back because I honestly think that it, like him fighting Nate Diaz, there's not actually going to be a huge gap in whether he gets the next title shot if he beat Leon Edwards or if he beat Nate Diaz. Well, think about, or even think about this. So let's say that they were gonna, you know, make Masvidal versus Leon Edwards like a top billing pay-per-view, right? Which is potentially more challenging than doing it with Nate Diaz and making it the BMF, you know, title defense or whatever. So let's say that they did that though, and Jorge wins by decision, but it's a real, you know, it's a tough fight, man, like a real tough fight. Or he obliterates Nate Diaz, obliterates him, like beats him, you know, is the first person to finish Nate Diaz after really hammering him, man, like was potentially going to happen in the last fight. Not necessarily for sure, but was on the way there if things continued that direction, you know, through the fourth and fifth. Which is more, which do you think is like more deserving of a title shot? Like, you know, that he was able to get a victory over Leon Edwards, or that he took a fight with a superstar and he beat him down, really beat him down, like hurt him and then finished him, a person who's almost impossible to finish. I think the, you know, given fight game, that's the one that's going to be more decisive in terms of like he should get the next shot. But everything hinges on what happens with Colby and Tyron. Because if Colby really puts it on Tyron, then he'll get the next shot, I think, no matter what. Even if, and I, you know, and that's the other thing. If Masvidal, I didn't even think about this. Wow, I didn't even think about this. Okay, so talking this through, like I said, so what's the other thing, right? So Masvidal legitimately doesn't like Leon Edwards, right? Like it's not, I don't think it's a show. He punched him in the face. I think at that point you can basically call the guy your legitimate like enemy. I mean, you know, I don't know if he's got like super hard feelings or anything, but he doesn't like him. And guess what happens if he fights Leon Edwards? What happens if he fights and loses to Leon Edwards? All of a sudden, it's not a two-man race anymore for who gets the next shot, which between him and Colby, right? So, and I'm talking like going forward. Like going forward, it's not. So like, let's say that Gilbert Burns beats Usman. Right now, it's Masvidal, Colby, and Usman for who's going to get the next shot. So he's battling against two guys. Okay, he loses to Leon Edwards. All of a sudden, now it's four guys that are vying for the next title shot. Once he gets another win, whatever. It's like giving Leon Edwards that fight puts him in the mix for title shot contention, which then, you know, if you're saying that's like the real competition, I mean, the best thing you can do to keep him out of it if you're playing chess and you're being a dick about it is just to not give him a fight, right? I mean, the coronavirus, like Leon Edwards getting pulled out of that Tyron Woodley fight killed him, man. Just killed him. Killed him. Because he would have won. And he'd probably be getting this title shot right now instead of Gilbert Burns. I mean, who knows? He might have beat him, and then he might have fought Usman in fight out. He might be the champion right now. Instead of sitting on the outside begging someone to fight him. I mean, who's he going to fight? It's a rough situation he's in, honestly. But anyway, that's what I got. So subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. I promise you. Compare this video to whatever other videos you see people talking about Masvidal and Nate Diaz, and you tell me who's going deeper on the topic and breaking it down, son. Pepsi challenge.